during the breakouts. And now we get ready for speaker number 5 at the AI Summit. That's Dr. Natalie Pettihoff with Competitive Advantage Consulting. And Natalie is going to speak about AI and empathy, designing experience at scale and drive loyalty. It's wonderful to have you, Natalie. Thank you for
Thank you,
joining us.
Gerald. Thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Oh my gosh, I could just soak in all these speakers. They're just really amazing.
Thank you. I get to do it every month. I look forward to this.
It's pretty incredible. Thank you, Gerald, for putting all this together. We really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Okay, to share my screen. Here we go. So what I'm going to talk about is empathy and AI. And the idea here is that they're better together. And oftentimes I think people think a lot about the technology, but what I really want to speak to is the technology and the people and why it's better to look at it this way. So since the beginning of time, we have been at the effect of how technology has changed our lives. And we're currently now in the 5th industrial revolution. And this is the time when there's the possibility for deep, multi-level collaboration between machines, people, and awareness. And at the same time, we are in another hype cycle. So this hype cycle was developed by Gartner back in 1995. And what's interesting to me, having been in technology for a long time, is that every technology goes through the same hype cycle. So CRM, ERP, cloud, social, digital, and now here we are in that kind of hype cycle for generative AI. And part of that is because it can take time for an organization to really become ready to adopt the new technology. Organizational change is really part of this because we're really changing the way that we interface with people, and people can be the long pole in that tent. So that's part of why I want to talk about how important empathy is. So let's take a look at, I'm going to take a look at 2 areas. The first one is customer service, and the second one is the future work or the employee experience. So we're all customers, right? We've chatted or tried to dial and talk to customer service. And after you press a bunch of buttons or try to press 64 to try to figure out, you've forgotten what the prompts were. And so what's interesting is that we've designed experiences that actually make customers frustrated. And the blind spot for many companies is that they'll just find more customers. But what we find today in the research is that customers are voting with their feet and with their mouses. In fact, the research shows that 80% of executives believe that they provide an amazing experience, yet only 8% of customers agree. And so that makes a lot of us feel this way. And sometimes what we see is that we've programmed our scripts. So whether it's a chatbot or an agent to say things like, oh, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. I know how disappointing this is. I'd be disappointed too. When in fact, what our customers really want is they want help, and they want you to know what they need. Their house is on fire, and they want you to say, okay, not apologize, but get the hose. So we programmed our agents and our bots to respond in ways that really aren't sincere. And that's made customers feel like they don't matter, and that affects their loyalty. Now let's look at applying empathy and AI to the employee experience. So I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting and they start to brainstorm, and I really like cartoons because a lot of times they really represent kind of the funny part of reality, but also some things that are kind of true. And so one of the things that I found sometimes when you're brainstorming is this not invented here. So you might make a suggestion and it gets shot down, or sometimes the boss just takes it and pretends like it's theirs, right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't really make us feel very engaged. And it's really no surprise that Gallup's research has shown that 77% of the workforce globally is doing something called quiet quitting. What that means is they show up for work, but they don't put their whole heart into it. So for every dollar that enterprises are spending on salary, they're really getting about 23% in productivity. but it's no surprise why, right? It's not about necessarily return to office, it's about the culture. 50% of the workforce has one foot out the door, meaning that they're interviewing and looking for a better opportunity. What's also fascinating is that the research shows that 77% of the people, they know what they want, but the question is, are we as leaders really truly listening and making the changes to the culture that are required? And the blind spot for companies is that they think they'll just find more employees, but that's not necessarily the case. So the idea behind AI, whether it's for customer service or employee, is to make it more productive, more innovative, a better experience. And AI, hands down, everybody here has shown that that is possible. And what's key here is remembering that employees know what gets in the way of their productivity, where the friction and the frustration is. And they are the ones that are interfacing with customers. So they see what that frustration is. And for all these reasons, AI is not an IT project. It's everyone's responsibility, and it really starts with strategy. So we've come to a very interesting place in corporate America. Many people feel invisible, and fundamentally, there are cracks in the system. So what's the disconnect? Well, a lot of people have asked me this question, and as I find myself as a kind of an anthropologist, a Margaret Mead of technology. And I think part of what happened is the pandemic created this interesting cause for pause. And in those quiet moments, we asked ourselves really big questions about work, about our lives, and what we really wanted for ourselves. And many of us found ourselves feeling like we weren't heard or seen or valued or quite invisible. And so what leaders really need to understand as they're considering transforming and exponentially transforming their organizations with AI is that the workforce and customers are in a very different mindset. And I know there'll be some companies that will use a command and control mindset, kind of that old get on the bus or it's going to run over you kind of thing. But that's not really a good idea. And why should businesses care about this employee disengagement? Well, the studies show that for like a small, medium-sized S&P company, between 228 million and $355 million will be lost in productivity per year. So it's really important to not skip over these flags, these red flags, especially when it comes to culture. And oftentimes, employees may be fearful, right? So if you really want adoption, you really have to look at creating the possibility, and an inclusive approach will be much more successful. So we know customers are frustrated, employees are sick of their jobs, and businesses are struggling. We still see a lot of layoffs, which is really concerning. So why? Well, when you're traveling 60 miles an hour, a blind spot can be really dangerous and put a lot at risk. But what if you could see something you couldn't see before? Might that be of value? So I really want to look at the idea of empathy as a business strategy. So what do I mean by that? So one of the biggest blind spots is not using empathy as a business strategy. And empathy is really the ability to sit in the seat of other people and understand their perspective. And when a culture doesn't have empathy, leaders miss the perspective of the very people, the customers, and the employees that know what's not working. And that means they miss essential facts that lead to blind spots because they aren't getting at the root cause. And so oftentimes I see technology deployed and we're doing the wrong things faster, which doesn't really make any sense. And someone mentioned common sense, and common sense is really important with AI. AI and empathy is the ability to sit in the seat of others, hear their feedback, and remember that feedback is the canary in the coal mine and the golden insights, which are required for competitive differentiation. And that's, again, why AI can't just start with the technology. Okay, so now let's look at the spectrum of AI technologies. And what I really want to talk about here is what if we connect all the amazing technologies that we're all being asked to look at and to learn and use empathy as a business strategy. That gives us the opportunity to become even more customer and employee-centric. So let's take a look. So if you're in customer service or in the future of work, you probably use some sort of robotic process automation to automate tasks, right? And so when I look at AI and I think of it as an automation technology, and we've experienced this looking at checking account balances, being able to scan a receipt, checking your deposit, or adding maybe a check. And in corporate lives, we've used this for payroll processing, onboarding new employees, and maybe sorting incoming customer service requests. The next thing that really became pretty big in the automation technologies is using predictive AI. And so what I'm doing here is I'm kind of teasing apart different types of AI. So predictive AI is really understanding and predicting future events based on historical data. And in our personal lives, it's kind of like if you like this, then you like that kind of scenarios. Think of Amazon or Netflix recommendations or wearable health devices where you have insights based on your activities or sleep patterns. In our corporate lives, we may have used this for customer service agents for the next best action. And I addressed that in the book that I wrote. A salesperson could use it to analyze and score leads, or we could use it to determine if a person should be insured and what their premium might be. The next kind of AI is conversational AI, and that's really facilitating communication between humans and machines. So think about chatting with a chatbot or responding to an SMS. In our personal lives, we've experienced it with Alexa, Siri, or Google Assist, or maybe even a voice-powered AI assistant. In our corporate lives, many of us have interfaced with bots. So Sephora has a really interesting use case where they help customers find products, book appointments, and get makeup tips. And those that engage with that bot are 80% likely to be a return customer. Starbucks uses it to make personalized coffee orders, and Whole Foods allows you to chat with a chef bot. Now, generative AI. So generative AI is about taking the input and creating and generating new content or automating responses without the need for predefined scripts. So in our personal lives, if you haven't logged on to OpenAI or other chatbots, it's, I think, one of the most important things. And I want to give a shout out to Carol because I really love her approach. This is a new field. A lot of us have been working for a long time, or maybe you're younger and you haven't been in the workforce. But one of the things that Carol mentioned, I think, is so important is that you always have to have an open mindset and you always have to be learning. So it's really key to experience it. And I think one of the most fascinating things about OpenAI and the chatbot is that when you go in to do something, and some examples here are teach you to negotiate, plan a surf trip, translate a recipe, build a budget, is that when you use these chatbots and you put in a prompt, and I'll talk about what a prompt is in a second, what it does is it gives you a visceral experience of the power behind these generative and large language models. And in fact, the pictures that I've shown for the spectrum of technologies, what I did there was I put in a prompt, I described the technology, and I said, draw a picture. And I did that with Dolly. And I don't draw. So in 3 seconds, they came up with these absolutely gorgeous images. So it really gives you that visceral experience about how amazing and creative you can be. Now, corporate uses. So a little bit of differentiation between your personal life and the corporate use. When you put your information into an open chatbot, you're exposing your data to everyone. So when you're in a corporation, you want to look at an enterprise license. And the reason for that, regardless of which language model that you use, the reason for that is you want to keep your data private. So think about a private instance like in a cloud model, and this is also very similar. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the benefits and some of the things that you can do. So let's say, for instance, you have a snippet of code and you really want to figure out how to debug it. Within a matter of seconds, you put in the code and you get the answer. And this is why you want a private instance, right? Because if you're going to put in proprietary information about your company, you really want to make sure that it's protected. It's also important to look like, let's say, a marketing application. So the input that you'd need is all your products, all your services, your competitive differentiation, kind of like your secret sauce. And then you can put this into a request, like write a blog post or write marketing content or sales content. And you can do that. And what you get is a really great overview. And it may not be the thing that you end up using long term. What's really great is it gets you something to really start really quickly. Let's say in finance, and you have an F1 document, and F1 documents are typically used, let's say, when you're going to do an IPO, and maybe you want to summarize that. Maybe if you're in finance, numbers are your thing and writing isn't. So very quickly, the large language models can analyze this and be able to give you a really nice description. And HR applications are really amazing. HR gets asked all the time, all kinds of questions about benefits. Imagine that if you could have a bot, you input all your HR benefits, all the things that are your typical questions, and imagine a bot that could answer that very quickly and easily for all your employees. I want to talk a little bit about prompt engineering. And prompt engineering to me is really like if you had an assistant, how would you interact with that assistant to get the output that you really want? Let's say you're creating sales or marketing materials. So let's look at what I did here was I created an imaginary business. And the more exact that you can be with these models, the easier and the more specific information that you'll get out. So here I'm saying I'm an online business coach, and I teach busy moms starting a new online business how to leverage the power of virtual training programs so that they can grow their business. Can you please describe the psychographics and demographics of my ideal clients? So with that prompt, now gives you an amazing output of demographics and psychographics. Now, the second hack that I'm going to show you here, so let's say, okay, we have that information about our ideal client. The next thing is, so now I want to know what are their pain points, because when I'm interacting with them, whether I'm talking to them in a sales situation or I'm creating sales or marketing materials, I really want to make sure that I truly understand what they're worried about. So based on that information, the next thing I would ask ChatGPT is, what do you think their pain points and challenges are related to achieving their results and both professionally and personally? And the hack here is to ask ChatGPT to provide both obvious and non-obvious answers. So what's really fascinating when you do that, so obvious challenges could be something like time management, right? And the non-obvious challenges would be things like overcoming imposter syndrome or decision fatigue or maintaining consistency and momentum. And then another interesting hack is to ask it to provide it in a more visceral way. And what you see here is something like time management is now rephrased as the juggling act. And as a marketer, that might be the phrase that you want to use. The last thing now that you might want to ask your chatbot is, okay, so I know a profile of my ideal client, I know some of the pain points, and I can relate to them in everyday language. Now tell me about their desired outcomes, because I want to be able to say, if you buy our products and services, this is what you're going to get from us. And again, here, the hack is to use the obvious and non-obvious answers. So what's really interesting here is that you see like a range of things that you typically think about, and then the non-obvious give you an added dimension. So it's really important, I think, that you pick a chatbot or two. Different large language models are tuned to and trained to do different things. So I highly suggest that you try a couple different ones, and depending on your particular area of business and the things that you want to get, I think you'll really find it fascinating. And I think I'm not a developer, right? So I think what was fascinating for me is to see the user interface and how easy it's been to be able to take advantage of large language models. All right. So if some of the things that I've talked about seem appealing to you, you might be asking yourself, how do I become an empathetic AI leader? And I think there are really three simple steps. The first one is to actively listen. And this can be really hard because as a leader, sometimes you think that you know the answer and you want to be the first one in the room to speak. So the key here is to actively listen so that you can hear other people's feedback, your employees and your customers. And there's something that we talk about in programming, which is the idea of when you want to debug something, and it's asking why like 100 times so that you really get at that root cause. And so you can say something very simply like, tell me more about that. And then integrate that feedback into your decisions, into the choices that you make. And it's really simple, but it's sometimes changing behavior that's really, really key. And it's going to help you take that AI technology and make your business incredibly successful. So I'll leave you with a few thoughts. I believe that the next wave of innovation is going to come from the application of generative AI, predictive AI, conversational AI, and quantum computing. And truly, we can imbue technology with our hopes and dreams. I believe that we just have to know what we're optimizing for and why. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Dr. Natalie. And while you were speaking, I gave everybody a huge bonus. I gave everybody an entire copy of your book.
Oh, thank you, Gerald. I
So
really super appreciate that.
I've uploaded it in the chat. Matter of fact, I'm going to do it again right now because the chat is like it's on fire. So right now, I have officially uploaded Empathy in Action, and you'll see the PDF. So thank you so much for what you shared, and we look forward to having you respond to people's comments in the chat and check the Q&A. There are 22 comments in the Q&A, so I think some
Oh my
people
God.
left some messages for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.